Hi everyone, I'm Howard from ForderLearnToFly. Today we're going to build a home cockpit panel. As you saw from the opening scene, a complete panel all ready to go with all the dials, all the instruments, everything that we need in front of our face so that we can now free up our screens for scenery. And as many of you know, with Microsoft Flight Simulator, Update 10 is going to give us multiple screens now. All right, you saw in the opening scene, I'm still using one screen. Now, to accomplish this, we either have some hardware we want to mount in front of us, or we buy the panel with all the hardware that's needed. As you can see from the screen behind me here, this is the FlightVelocity website. They're the ones that make these panels. They also partner with all the electronics that you see here. They partner with a number of companies to supply you with other products to go with their panels. For instance, you can see here Thrustmaster. They can supply a computer. Here's the Class Echo. Here's an upcoming product that you can pre-order, but you can certainly buy the Alpha Bravo yoke from them. So, you know, they can give you a complete solution instead of saying, here's a blank panel, good luck finding your hardware. They give you the option to have a complete kit. Or even if you're buying a blank panel, you can add the electronics that you're still missing. So that's a beautiful thing, honestly, to be able to just stay here and get it all that you need. And when it shows up, you start assembling. And that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to assemble one of the blank panels with electronics I already have. Now I'm going to go pretty fast, like I'm going to fast forward a lot of that assembly, because putting individual screws and nuts, bolts and nuts in each one of those displays is a long time. So, you know, we don't want to sit and drag through all of that. But you'll get the feel for how to put it together, and you get an idea of how it feels afterwards, which is pretty awesome. First, let's go into the kits. Now, the kits include the electronics, so they're complete solutions. You can see there's an air manager, a couple air managers here. This one's actually an air manager screen too. You can see the screens are changing. This one here is a G1000. So you can look at each one of these. Look at this huge one built up here. There's a lot of stuff in there. So let me just give you an idea. I mean, we'll just click on it. It includes all the electronics that you see. That's why the price is so high. All right, there's the autopilot panel. These are called flight instrument displays, or FIDs, or flight instrument panels, I think they're called. And each one of these can be dedicated to whatever you want them to be. I'm going to show those to you up close. I got a bunch of those. Here's a couple of radio panels, and here's their switch panel. These are all SATEC panels, SATEC displays, and a SATEC yoke and throttle. So this is the SATEC display. Now, all of those electronics are not cheap when you add them all up. You'll notice in here also comes with the yoke and throttle, comes with the rudder pedals and all of the displays that you need to make it all work. And that's why they're giving you a picture of each one to show you what they look like. Now, you can also add, they mention in here, you know, it's really convenient. They mention here, oh, I need a PC to go with that. Hey, you're going to increase that price by quite a bit. And then a 49-inch curved gaming monitor. Oh, I want one of those too. So you can tell that, you know, when you sit here, oh, primary flight display, iPad, okay, or FIPS. So this is flight instrument panels. That's what these things are right here, these small square ones that show an instrument on each one. Those are flight instrument panels, all right? And so the iPad version would be something like, where did we just see that? I thought we just saw it somewhere. But it would replace all of this with one or two iPads. But anyway, you know, you got so many variations on these panels. So that's what's called the kit. A kit comes with the electronics. So it isn't just the panel. They make this panel, and they make it for specific electronics that you have in the configuration that you want. All right, so certainly that's nice. This one sits pretty high, actually. So your monitors are going to have to be even higher. I'll show you a quick way to make, an easy way to make monitors higher up. I use simple 1x6 pieces of wood from Home Depot, and I just cut the brackets that I need, whether it be 6 inches off the table or whether it be 8 inches off the table. You can pick and choose, right? And it's a simple way. You don't have to go buy monitor mounts and all the rest of that. So let me just go back for a second. That's what a kit is. And just bear with me while I'm just set the stage here, everybody, because then I'm going to move over to the studio where I'm actually building it. And right from scratch. And I'm going to show you what it looks like from scratch. And we will put it all together and fly it. That's what we're going to do in this video. Obviously, I'm going to compress a lot of that time. All right, so now let's go look at, those are kits. You can certainly look around those. If we go to blank panels now, and this is where I got my panel from. So at the time I looked and saw what electronics I had. I didn't have a 530, 430 to work with. So then I just selected one for my SATEC hardware. As I looked down the list of all the different configurations that are stock panels, I picked the one that most closely resembled what I have. And what I have is this one right here, the FV3 mid-profile. Now mid-profile means it's not too high off the table. It actually does have part of it going below the table. So this is what I've picked. Now when you look at this one allows you to have, I mean, it's already got pre-cut areas that are very easy to remove and put in your electronics. So you can see from here, it's got the mounting holes already. It's got pieces of plastic still holding them together in case you want to leave them there and in case you want to put something else in and cut something else. But it's simple enough to cut these 4 tabs, pop out that panel, and put in your own electronics. That's so easy. So there's the draw for this. The material's rigid enough. It looks like a cockpit the way they've designed it. And they've got the pre-cut out areas. So it's very easy to assemble. Can you imagine if you had to draw your lines, get out the jigsaw, cut all your areas that you need. And certainly you can do that too. Buy a blank panel, make it your own if you wish. The beauty of this is it's made, whatever you've bought is made for the electronics you have. These SATEC panels, even the mounting holes line up perfectly. I didn't have to re-drill them. I didn't have to relocate them. And so all of these are pretty tedious, putting in 6 of these small displays and 4 screws on each one, or actually nuts and bolts on each one. And they supply all the hardware too. It's a whole big package full of hardware that will make this all work. So this is the panel I selected because I have the 4 electronics. I have the multi-panel, radio panel, switch panel, and I also have, I already have the rudder pedals, the yoke and throttle, and I have the 6-pack. So you know, these are, when you look at this list, I have all that stuff. I don't need to buy any of that. I don't need to include it. So really, this is my cost. Now, the people at FlightVelocity have been so kind to send me this, knowing that I'm going to do a video and spend hours getting this ready for you in a preview video. So they've sent me this. I just had to pay for the shipping and probably the shipping and the tax. But you know, the point was that I wanted to show this on stream. I wanted to show this in my Twitch sessions. I wanted to show this here in this video. So they've been very kind in sending me the panel that I asked for. Now, in retrospect, I did order, eventually I did order from Flight Sim Builder. I did order the 530. I actually have 2 of them now. This one right here, the 530. And in a lot of the planes we fly, there's a 530, 430, not a G1000, and conventional dials. So I do have that, and I've been using it for other videos. I just did recently a 530 review video and RNAV approach using it on the stand that comes with it. And also I've now mounted it inside this same panel. So this same panel, you're going to see me take this area up here, already cut out, already did have a panel in there to see how it looked. Then I decided once I got the 530 to cut it out even bigger manually and then put the 530 in. So you're going to see that happen. All right. And then I'm going to put a tachometer over here with a flight instrument panel. So, you know, I've modified what it looks like. And in retrospect, once you have a 530, 430 combination, you don't need the radio stacks because the 530 is your COM1, the 430 is your COM2. So, and same with NAV1, NAV2. So you don't really need those. So the radio panels you don't need anymore. You don't really need these 2 slots. So you could buy the panel that actually has the 530, 430 in it. All right, there is one like that. Wherever I've seen it, right here. So when you take a look at this one here, it has the 530, 430. This one's actually made for real sim gear, 530, 430. You can see that right here. All right. And so again, you can include that with you. Now this is beautiful because they don't just sell you a blank panel and say good luck, as I mentioned before. They will actually say, oh, you would like this configuration, but you don't have the gear. Go find it on the Real Sim Gear site. They just say, here, include it right here. We'll ship it. And that's partnership, you guys. That's actually beautiful. They're giving you a complete solution, right? That would have been a better panel for me because I had to work this to make that happen. I only put one 530 in there, and the rest look the same as what I've got. All right, so the first thing, and sorry this is a bit lengthy, but this is important to lay the groundwork before we jump in and just assemble. How did I pick this panel? How did I, what electronics did I already have? So there's your first two things to remember is what is your desired end result? What do you want it to look like? If you're predominantly flying G1000, you need a G1000 panel. If you already have the G1000 units from Flight Sim Builder or from RealSim Gear, you've got to buy the panel that fits those units. That's important, all right? Once you know what you're after, once you know the electronics you have or you want, then you pick the panel. Don't pick the wrong panel. You don't want to have that whole shipping thing. It's a big, huge box. You don't want to have to mess around with, oh, now I realize I need a different panel. I made mine work with the 530. And you can do the same too, but it's easier just to buy the panel you're after, all right? So that's the idea behind it all. Let's just come back here for a second. As you can see, when you get into, say, the G1000, which I'll be doing next because I have the Flight Sim Builder G1000, you can pick which configuration. For instance, this one here, this is for the Honeycomb Alpha Bravo. You can see it's a simpler panel when you cut everything out, but it's got the cutouts made for it, all right? Over here you can see it's the same thing, but this one, G1000 panel, this one you can tell by the opening is made for the SATEC yoke, whereas this one's made for the Honeycomb Alpha Bravo. Again, here I see a 530, 430 across the top and a panel underneath and the six-pack directly in front of you. So, you know, you can take a look at each one of these and just say, which configuration do I need? Which configuration do I want? And what flight yoke do I have and what throttle do I have? And once you know all that, then away you go from there. This is the one I'll be getting next because, again, it's mid-profile. It's not too high. Some of this sits a little lower. They can actually mount these things. They can mount, if you look at the right ones, you can mount them, you can mount the Alpha Bravo under the desk with one of these panels. And that will save you some height because how are you going to see over that panel? So some of those things you have to think about. Do I want it to be Alpha Bravo under the desk or Alpha Bravo above the desk? And you can tell from these ones, these are like what I have, where they sit on the desk and then part of the panel goes below the desk surface. Perfect. So now you got an idea, you guys. I'm not going to dwell on it anymore, but you get an idea of how to make this happen. How do you select one of these? You don't just grab any old thing and start cutting. It's got cutouts for you. You can also pay a premium, some cost, I don't know if it's $200, to make a panel of your choice. And you can say to them, here's my exact dimensions. Now they'll want to know exactly what you want. And then they'll program it on their computer, on their milling machine, and they'll send a blank panel in to be cut, and then they'll ship it to you. So that takes extra work. It's a one-off, as they say, and you always pay for something like that. Anyway, that gives you an idea, everybody. That's a start. So let's move over to the studio now and take a look at the real panel, and let's get started with cutting out, assembling, and all of that tedious work so that we can start flying. Let's start with what's in the box. When it ships to you, it comes in a very long rectangular box. As you open it up, you'll see some padding and you'll see an extra small little box. Let's first look at the panel itself as we pull it out of the box. As you can see, it's this ABS plastic has already been put together for us. The whole perimeter part is put on already. The holes are already pre-cut for what I selected from all the panels that you can select from. And FlightVelocity has done a great job of making this the way you want it. So the next thing I want to look at is, let's have a close-up view of the actual outside part of it. I also want to point out here that we have color-coded areas here, green in the middle and blue on both sides. Those are for the brackets we have to put on that are also color-coded. Now I want to open up the little box and see what hardware is in there. As you can see, we'll start out by taking a look at the fact that there are two C-clamps, just your normal everyday C-clamps. Now those are important. Those are going to go on both ends, clamped to the table. It's also going to be connected by the yoke itself. So there are the end clamps themselves, or the end brackets for the clamps. They're color-coded with blue. Two of those. And then you'll also see that there's a big longer one. This bracket is used to mount to the yoke and then to the panel. So the yoke's going to help hold the panel in place and keep it sturdy. And then finally it sends a whole package of hardware so that you can mount every single one of the devices inside this panel. Now those are the same size screws or nuts and bolts that you have already, but it has the extra length so that you can mount it on the panel itself. I used every one of them but two. I also want to point out the modules that I'm using. These are the ones I have available and how I determined which module, which panel I would buy. You can see there's my switch panel with the landing gear. These are called flight instrument panels, these little square ones. There's my SATEC yoke. I also have the SATEC pedals underneath. There's a FlightVelocity trim wheel with the adjustable speed on it. You also see there's my autopilot module, and there's my radio panel. These are all SATEC devices, easily used nowadays because we use the Logitech driver for them, and they work just fine. All right, that wraps it up. Let's go take a look at how we plan on assembling it. So first we want to figure out what do we have, and then where does it go on here. Now you can see from this panel here that we've got room for 1, 2, 3, 4 large panels. So we've got 2 over there. We've got 1 over here, switch panel. And that's sort of the layout that I want. I want the switches over here. And then we got 3, 4, 5 displays where we could have room for 6 in the middle. And then the trim wheel and the throttle, which will mount down to the right side. So now we know where we want things. Now we have to get these ready. So what we'll do is now we'll disconnect all of these back pieces. Now you notice that each one of these has a piece on it that lets it rest on the table or even rest on top of each other. And that works for an inexpensive solution. What we want to do is take out all of these little screws, and they're not very long. You can't use these again. Once you go through the plastic, you need the longer screws that come with the kit. But let me just show you what this looks like as we take these off. Now we take that piece away, and what we've really got is this nice thin piece. Now that easily mounts the size of this backing goes right inside one of these holes perfectly, and the holes line up for the screws. Now the screws will have to have the extra hardware that comes with it. So let me continue now, and we'll probably fast forward it as I take all the screws out so that these things are ready to go. Okay, with all of our panels ready to be mounted, let's commence mounting them. And now at this point we're going to mount the panel on the desk. Much easier to work with mounting each of the pieces of hardware and getting at the screws and the nuts and bolts from the other side. So we're going to mount it vertically where it belongs. We're going to need the yoke, and we're going to need the 3 brackets, the one with the green on it, the one with the 2 blue. And after we mount all of that, we're going to put the C-clamps on both ends. That package of screws and nuts and bolts we won't need yet. we'll just put those aside for now. Now at this stage, we're going to prepare the yoke so that we can mount the panel. So let's start first by removing the yoke and the bracket at the bottom. That's going to be important later because it's going to help with stability of the panel. And once that's removed, we can get at the screws. We can just show it better on the camera. Just going to tilt this a little bit and then just show you the screws that have to be removed. So each of those screws all along the top edge of that yoke, each of those use an Allen key, and you'll have to remove each one of them. So we'll do that in quick order here in the video. And once those are removed, we're going to be mounting the panel right onto those screws. And then this yoke will then be, the normal yoke mount at the bottom will still be put back on again. This is going to help immensely in keeping this panel rigid and keeping it there. Especially when you're moving around and moving the yoke in and out and touching things on the panel. You want this thing to be sturdy on the desktop. So here we go in fast time. Let's see this thing happen. There we go. Look at that. That is so easy. But in fact, that does take time. You probably want to use a dedicated Allen key for that, because then you can just spin it. I was just using a multi-Allen key in this case here. All right, once that's all done now, you just set it on the desk and we're ready to go. All right, the next stage. Let's move them out of the way. Let's bring in the big panel. Now the panel's all set to go. We just have to fasten it to the desk. So that's going to be the next step. Let's look at the back side, because we have to mount the two brackets with the blue dots on them. They have 4 screws. I keep using the expression screws, you guys. Technically, they have 4 nuts and bolts. And these nuts and bolts need to be loosely put together, meaning we want to still have some play in there because of the height of the desk. So we're going to use the yoke as the height, or the height gauge. And so we're going to see that in, coming up in the video. But right now we're just going to loosely attach them so that they can still slide up and down. Here we're showing you it a bit slowly, and then we'll speed it up a bit. Once you put all 4 screws in, just make sure they're not tightened, because that thing still has to move up and down. And we'll show you what we mean by the yoke determines the height. All right, because it's going to rest on the yoke. We're going to put all the screws into the yoke, and then we will adjust these to the desktop and then tighten them. So that's going to be the next stage. So we're going to do the same to the other side now. Come over to the other side. The blue matches the blue. Put in the 4 screws. Again, the 4 hardware pieces. Let's put in the 4 nuts and bolts, you guys. I do know the difference. And so again, we'll just keep them nice and loose. And let's speed it up. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's fast. And I do want to caution you guys about using power screwdrivers. Make sure you have a clutch on them. And what I mean by a clutch is that you can adjust on some of them, of course. You can adjust when it does reach the bottom, or when it does finally tighten. The clutch takes over and it makes a funny noise because it's not exerting any more power. Now let's take a look at this. So this is the hacksaw. I'm using the first method here, taking a hand blade hacksaw to just start to cut out the openings. Now this is exciting, because now we're actually going to the stage of opening it up and getting it ready to mount the hardware. So here I'm doing it manually with a hacksaw to open up each one. Takes a bit of time, but it's slow, it's precise, it works. But for the rest of this demonstration, I'm just going to use my Dremel tool. Why do it slowly by hand when you can use a power tool? Well, okay. So I'm just using a simple grinder cutter. It's actually a cutter disc on it. Be careful, because as you speed this thing up, it can melt the plastic, and that's what it's actually doing here. You'll see some of the fragments still there. Be precise. I mean, you want your panel to look good afterwards. You don't want big gaps in there. You don't want it to be ragged. But you can see right there the piece of plastic that's still left over. And we'll clean that up as we go along. As I finish each of these openings, I'll probably just go in and start picking those up. Now while it's still running, I'm just going to go and cut a bunch of them, and then I'll probably clean it up afterwards. You can see how easy that is. Once you actually do that, they just kind of fall away. And here I'm just touching up some of the plastic bits. But you might find if you just move them, as soon as they harden, they actually fall off. Now let's take a look over here. Look how fast this can be. Now I'm speeding up the video, of course. But I've decided once I'm in that position with the Dremel tool, might as well do a bunch of them in that same position. And there you can see them just falling away. Now I'm doing 5 of the openings, but later on I actually end up opening that 6th one, because I do end up buying another FIP display to put in there. So you'll see the finished product will actually have 6 of them in there. Now up here I'm only going to take out this one, because I only have 3 of the 4 main panels. I don't have 4 panels. But you'll see later, again, I'm going to open up I'm going to open up the extra one and mount the 530. So that's a whole different thing, you guys. And I don't know if I have some footage of me mounting the 530, but the whole idea is that I'm going to have to cut some more. And I'll use the Dremel tool for that. So there I'm cleaning up all the stuff. Let's turn it around, put it on the desk, and just see what it looks like. Oh, it's starting to take shape. And yeah, everything fits. This is great. And so now what we'll do is we'll work on this middle part. Now this middle part is a bracket. Again, green against green. They just match up the numbers, or the colors. And here, you know, I'm starting it slowly to show you what I do, but then I'll just speed it up because, again, it's putting nuts and bolts together. Again, loosely tied together so that this thing can still move up and down. And once we put the yoke in place and mount this on the yoke first, then we can mount the other sides. Now, this is a mistake a lot of people make with these panels. They mount the sides first and then they try and stretch this down to the yoke. And it seems that it's not so sturdy. So here we're going to do the end pieces first to hold it in place. And this is hard to see because I couldn't quite get a camera around there, but I'm going to take these C-clamps, the two that they supply, and put one on each end on those blue brackets. All right, let's turn it around, have a look. There's my loose part in the middle where the yoke is going to go, and there are the blue brackets on the end. So right now I'm just going to open up the C-clamps and just make sure they fit around and just show you how they're going to fit. This is as close as I can get to bringing a camera around to the back. So there I'm going to just open it up. Hey, look at that, one-handed. Huh, I've done this before. And so now I'm going to just turn that, put it in place. It's going to look something like that when I'm done. So it'll be on the desktop, plus it'll be on the bracket. That's the secret, you guys. That's the part I can't show you once it's in place. And then you just tighten it right up. Now I'll do the same for the second C-clamp while I'm here, just to get it opened up and ready to go. And that's going to go on the other side. All right, now let's flip it around. Let's put it in place where we want it. Position it on the table because you can still move it afterwards. You can undo the yoke, the main yoke desktop screw, and then you can also open up each of the C-clamps just enough to slide it, and you can move it left and right. Now there I tried it upside down and it didn't work quite that way because the panel was in the way. Then I put it down that way, the right way, and next thing you know, that's going to work. So those we'll just put in place and then tighten them from the bottom, and then the panel will be held in place. Now remember, those blue brackets are loose, just like the center one. They're still loose. I haven't tightened those screws on the left and the right. So now I'm going to put the yoke in because the yoke is going to secure the whole thing to the yoke, and the yoke is going to secure itself to the table. This is important. So this is how you determine the height of the whole panel, by the yoke. All right, so I'm going to put that in just to get it ready to go. Not going to tighten that up completely yet because the top I need to tighten first. All right, so you can see that I'm taking my time securing it, and then now I'll take the original bolts that came out of the top, the little tiny Allen key bolts that came out of the top of the yoke now, and I'm going to put those back in now, holding the panel in place. This is important. All right, this is the main reason why we're doing this first, is to hold the whole panel with the yoke. Then we'll go to the sides and tighten those clamps. All right, as simple as that. Now I have tightened the clamps down below, but I haven't tightened the brackets up above. So here I am using a clutched screwdriver. It's a little bit of an overkill, but that's all I had. And now that that's attached to the yoke, now I can go underneath the yoke now and tighten that up. Once it's all tightened and in place, now I can go to the C-clamps, the brackets of the C-clamps, and just tighten those bolts too. Pretty simple, you guys, once you figure it all out. It's really just about positioning it, getting it sturdy so that all 3 points are holding it sturdy in place. We're going to put electronics in there. We're going to be pushing buttons and turning dials. So we want to make sure. Here I'm just tightening all 4 bolts. And now both sides are tightened, clamps are tightened, yoke is tightened. We're ready to move on. Let's go and start putting in the FIPs. That's what they're called. The flight instrument panels. There they are. These little things are so expensive. I think about 170 Canadian, maybe about 145 American, just to buy each one of these things. Now luckily I had a bunch of these already from X-Plane days and FSX days, and so I was just using them sitting on the desk. And now here you can see I'm speeding it up obviously because this is boring stuff, right? And there they are, all 5 in place. Eventually I put a 6th one in there. All right, so now we move on to the main modules, the bigger modules. Just as easy as the FIPs, we're going to put them in and make sure the right side up, and we're going to just do the same thing, nuts and bolts that come with this panel that are long enough to go through these things and through to the other side. And then we simply put the nut on the end, snug them all up, and they do supply a little wrench, a little tiny wrench that you can use, but be careful you don't over torque them. Everything is plastic here. All right, snug them right up, make sure they don't move, and then you're in. Now I have mine clutched to about a 14, I think it is, on it. All right, and that 14, actually the clutch goes in before it crushes the plastic. And what I mean by clutch, right on the drill, you'll see some numbers if you've got a drill with a clutch. And if you don't have that, then be very cautious about drilling metal screws into plastic, all right? You don't want to crush everything. And there, that's as easy as that is, you guys. 4 screws, there we go again, 4 screws, it's all in place. I know, it's like if you learn nothing else in this video, you learn the difference between screws and nuts and bolts. Screws have the pointy end on it that can go into material, whereas bolts have a flat end and they go onto a nut. There we go. Let's stop calling them screws, Howard. And so there we see it. Again, I'm just doing things in fast time, you guys, because, you know, this is the boring stuff. But it's exciting because now we're actually putting all the panels in place. Now you'll notice here, I'm just doing the tightening now. That panel will move. That radio stack will move to the left side, and a 530 will go in up the top. All right, so this thing will change as I finish here. I'll still leave that autopilot panel down below, but I'll actually move the radio panel over and put a 530 in there from Flight Sim Builder, and you'll see that. I don't think I have video on that, so I'll just show you the end result. It's really just cutting away, measuring, cutting away again with the Dremel tool, and then making the mounting holes and putting it in. So it would have been a lot easier, as I said at the start of this whole series, would have been a lot easier just to get the right panel, knowing I would have put a 530 in there. But that's okay, we can modify, and that actually is good to see that you can modify. All right, things are mounted. This is great, and there's a close-up. Looks great. Now we'll move on and we'll put on whatever's left. I think we've got the throttle, and we've got the trim wheel. Now this does have a trim wheel right there on the autopilot panel. See the trim wheel to the right there? But you know, this is, you know, now we're going to put in the FlightVelocity trim wheel, which I already have. So it's a lot bigger and more realistic, and it's down beside the throttle where it belongs. So I'm going to use that. But certainly you can use the trim wheel that's up there. It says pitch trim on it on the autopilot, and you could use that very easily. So there's no need for both, but this one's more realistic, of course. Now this one is the Pro version. It's done by the same people who make this panel, the FlightVelocity Trim Wheel Pro. And this Pro version means it's a distinction between this one and the old one. The older version was great for X-Plane and FSX, but here in Microsoft Flight Simulator, we need this extra knob that you see there, that variable knob that you see on the top of it. I'm just looking to see which way it could go. I'm going to leave it this way. And you can mount this many different ways. But you see that knob at the top? That'll help with adjusting the speed of the trim wheel. As you turn the trim wheel, how fast do you want that elevator to move? And in the old version, without that knob on the top, the original version of this, that trim wheel was so slow. You would spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it, spin it, and finally trim a little more up. It was way too slow. So you'd spin it forever, and the encoder obviously sent tiny little pulses. Now with that variable, you can make that as fast as you want it, or as realistic as you want it, and that trim wheel can actually move pretty fast now. So the slight adjustments, and that's what's really important in real flying, slight adjustments on that trim wheel to adjust your attitude hands-free and let the yoke alone. And this is standard flying, right? Everybody knows that. So once that's in place now, as I'm messing around with the nuts and bolts and trying to get them working, then you'll see that, and we'll just go fast forward a little faster, put all the rest of the nuts and bolts in. Now we'll put in the throttle quadrant right in beside it. Fits beautifully. The mounting holes are already there. I mean, they've obviously thought about your standard setup, and I already had all of these. All right, so I've had all of these from before. Definitely the SATEC yoke and throttle and pedals I had from FSX, and so I already had these on hand. Now these throttles work great. I recommend them for beginners who are coming to Flight Simulator, and I recommend they get the SATEC yoke, throttle, and pedals as a package because it's inexpensive compared to the other things. Now eventually they might want to move up to something more robust. These throttle quadrant controls are very there's no tension. They're very loose, and they don't have any kind of real feel of a real plane. But they have, they have the controls you need. You need these 3 controls in a lot of the planes, and they work. And the switches below those throttles, I use those for outside view, inside view, flaps, etc. So that it helps. Those are toggle switches down below. So it really does. It really is useful, and I'm going to use it here on this panel for sure. There, I just can't resist just touching buttons and just trying things out and getting a feel for this layout, which is wonderful. Well, this last part here, we're just going to show you. I'm only doing a brief clip here of. There's some stands that I made out of wood. They're just 1x6 with a few screws in each end, and I made them at the right height. And so here I'm trying my monitors now to see how they look from when you sit down. So what I'm doing is going back and sitting down and looking over the panel. And when you look over the panel, do you see the bottom edge of the monitor without straining, without rubbernecking? So the idea is that your panel in front of your face, and when you look over it, you see scenery. You don't see underneath the monitor, you don't see above the monitor. So this is important. I found that it wasn't close enough. Then I also found that it wasn't high enough once I brought it closer. So I made lots of adjustments here, and then I painted them black. Just a spray paint black basic thing that you get from a hardware store, just so that they aren't just raw wood. And so it takes some time here. You can see the sawdust on my hat because I took a lot of sawing to make that happen, but they're easy to make, that's for sure. All right.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, beneath the halo of the East Street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light, split the light within the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe more, people talking without speaking, people hearing without listening, people writing songs that voices never shared. No one there disturbed the sound of silence. Fool, said I, you do not know, silence like a cancer grows. Hear my words and I might reach you, take my arms and I might reach you, but my words like silent raindrops fell and echoed in the wells of silence. And the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they made, and the signs that flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming. And the sign said the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls, whispered in the sounds of silence.